Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Low Season Traveller Insider Guides. I'm your host, Jed Brown, founder of Low Season Traveller, and today we are staying in the US as we hear from Susanne Lorenz, who owns and runs the AT West Tour company. Now, while most of us have been locked up indoors for most of the past year, Suzanne and her team have been out and about searching for new, mind-blowing experiences to showcase on their tours. Today, we catch up with Suzanne to learn more about her recent travels, as well as learning from her a little more about her exciting new tour, From San Antonio to Santa Fe, National Park Treasures of Texas and New Mexico. Enjoy. So, Suzanne, welcome to the Low Season Traveller Insider Guides podcast. It's great to have you on the show. How are you?
Hey, thank you. Excellent.
Good. And where are you, Suzanne, for our listeners at home?
I actually live in, or my office is in Denver, Colorado.
Very good. And you're clearly not from the good old United States of America. You're from over Europe way. Where are you from? And tell us then a little bit, Suzanne, if you don't mind, how you came to be in the US and how you came to be doing what you do with regards to these fabulous tours that you set up.
So I came to the United States on a scholarship. I'm originally from Germany, from Berlin, and I've always been a nature aficionado. So I love anything nature, wilderness, hiking, adventure, outdoor. So I came to the US on a Fulbright scholarship. I actually worked in refugee resettlement for about 10 years, and I got a scholarship to study migration issues in San Diego. And then, a few years after, working in social work, I kind of burned out and I started my outdoor business because I thought, what better thing than to bring nature to people?
100%.
And that's what I've been doing for almost 30 years. My business is in Denver, and we work with all the major tour operators in Europe. And we basically operate the hiking tours for them that are being offered.
Fabulous. And obviously, the starting point for this is you must be a pretty keen hiker yourself. You personally, I mean, this is where, it's the dream job, Suzanne, for you, isn't it? You get to suss it all out and do all of these hikes to make sure that the product is right. Yeah.
Yes, pretty much. Yeah. I've been exploring the Western United States for 30 years, and basically, I mean, I don't want to brag, but we put a lot of slot canyon destinations and trails on the map. Okay, so it's been wonderful.
What's a slot canyon?
Well, so a slot canyon is a narrow canyon that has been incised into rock, typically into softer rock like sandstone or limestone. Or ash deposits through water. So you have these, famous canyons like Antelope Canyon, but there are many more canyons, the Narrows in Zion, and there's one really beautiful slot canyon in New Mexico too. So, it's a fantastic geological formation to explore.
And with these slot canyons, I know, wasn't it? Who was this guy? This American guy, they made a film out of him who he got caught in a slot canyon and had to cut off his arm or whatever. I've forgotten his name. What was his name? Do you remember his name?
I forgot his name. I met him right after he cut off his arm. He did a press conference.
Oh my gosh.
He's from Colorado. So Utah is very close to us, and that's where we go in the shoulder seasons, when it's when the snow is gone, the skiing is gone, but the summer hasn't started. We go to Utah to go hiking, which is awesome.
That's incredible. But these, these places, these slot canyons, especially if it rains, they can flood. They can be dangerous. That's one of the reasons why it's really important, right, to either really know what you're doing or be on a guided tour, right?
Well, so I'm, I mean, the most incredible thing about the Western United States are our national park and public lands. 46% of the West is public. It's actually, if you think about it, the size of these countries, or not countries, of these states is unbelievably large compared to Europe. And 46% of the West is public, meaning there's no fence, there's no agriculture, we can go and play and have access to them. And if you really want to see the West, there is no better way than to go with a guide. You can go to the national parks, but they've become so incredibly overrun that you're going to be standing in line for an hour just to get in and another hour just to get parking. But if you have a guide, you will see the parks, plus you will also see the areas that you would never even know about that are also public land. So, I normally, when I start my trips, I normally start pulling out all the maps and try to find out who owns the land and where's the best trails. And then is this open to me or is this private property? And then, truly the best experiences that you can have are the ones that are off the beaten path. There's a very few national parks left that are not totally overrun. And, you don't want to miss out on those famous national parks. They are definitely, but I mean, like Utah, I would suggest now to go early November. I mean, Arches closes the gates when the parking has run out. And who wants to be there with, 5,000 other people on the same trail? It's just awful.
The whole point is to get away from everybody, isn't it?
Right. But I mean, I think in terms of outdoor playground, the Western United States, I've traveled the world adventuring, and I would say there's very few places like the Western United States. It's absolutely extraordinary.
Yeah. The tour that, so, while the rest of us have all been, we've all been locked down, we're not allowed out of our house. And while we've been doing that, you've been researching a whole load of new tours, which is very, very generous of you to be going out there and doing this research for us, Suzanne. But one of the ones which you're going to be talking to us about today is this From San Antonio to Santa Fe National Park Treasures of Texas and New Mexico. Tell us a little bit about this particular tour, and tell us why you decided to introduce this tour as well.
So I've been doing this business for almost 30 years. And, it was so easy 10, 15 years ago still, to take people into silence, wilderness, solitude, even in the national parks. And, as that experience has become more and more difficult to provide to my customers, I'm always looking for places that people can go, wow, I just love the silence. I love the dark nights. I like no crowds, no lines, no noise, no, just the birds and me, and, just take it all in. And it becomes harder and harder to do. A lot of people kind of refuse to go to these very famous parks off season, and some of them, they close the roads or the trails, or there's snow or there's other adversity. So I'm always looking for a place that, provides an just absolutely mind-blowing experience without, too much adversity when you go off season. And so one of the places that is really not featured by really anybody is the region that David and I explored, which is Texas and New Mexico. And I'm very familiar with New Mexico because, I have run many tours there. I've also visited my friend David there many times. But Texas was new to me. And I had heard about fantastic hiking in Big Bend, but that we would find so many other historical treasures and other national park treasures was really surprising to me.
What were your highlights? So, again, we've got the full tour. By the time this broadcast goes out, the full tour will be on the website, and we'll have all of the photos on there as well, which you've already sent through. What are the highlights of this particular tour for you that people should be aware of?
I think, it's always what surprised me about the region was San Antonio in combination with Santa Fe, and then going along the southern route of basically, which was the historical route of transportation, which was along the Rio Grande Valley. I've studied a lot of history. I've studied a lot of, the other areas, the Oregon Trail and the, Pony Express and this and that and the other. But really the one route that was open, more to the immigrants and to connect California with the rest of the United States, or really Galveston. Galveston was the main port. The one route was through the southern, along the southern area, which was the Rio Grande Valley. And there is so much history there. And there is so much, it kind of puts California, it connects California to the rest of the United States. You have to think about this in the 1800s. How did people move stuff from, the east to the west? I mean, this is a vast continent, and you don't have, you have a horse and a cart. How do you get news? How do you get stuff? How do you get supplies from one place to the other? It was absolutely fascinating to see that portion of the United States and how that connects to the rest of the West. It was really cool.
And
surprisingly.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's like we'd sort of said on the last podcast that when we were speaking to David about this, a lot of people in Europe, they kind of scoff when you talk about culture and the US. And of course, the US is absolutely laden with culture, and of course, indigenous culture as well. And I think, we often forget about that indigenous cultural aspect within the US as well. What with regards to the actual sort of the tour itself? Obviously, you're going to all of these missions, you're getting that sort of cultural aspect. And then what kind of a mix is it between, trail hiking and taking in the culture?
Well, so the focus is on being active, whether we are in Santa Fe or in San Antonio or in the national parks. We visit, I can give you a long list of parks we visit, but we visit a ton of parks on this 2-week itinerary. But, when we're in San Antonio in Texas, we'll be exploring the city on foot. Both of these cities are perfect to be explored on foot. So, again, the focus is on not sitting around or being on a tour bus, but actually walking, smelling, seeing, photographing, touching, getting really close with, the local, whatever the local is, And it's a wonderful combination of culture and nature, which is, I think, it just satisfies more senses.
Yeah. And then in terms of the highlights from a cultural perspective, what was your sort of personal highlight, or anything that kind of, I don't know, surprised you, I suppose, from a cultural side? And then also, what's your highlight from the natural side, the sort of the hiking and trail side? Anything that kind of surprised you or was unexpected as you were researching this trip?
Well, what really surprised me was how Santa Fe and San Antonio are linked because of the southern route of transportation, railroads, immigration. Railroads were a big part of how the West was, let's call it, settled, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that was really surprising to me, how that entire region ties in San Antonio, Santa Fe, and then California, and the history of Mexico. Mexico used to own most of the Western United States. It was taken from Mexico when the United States occupied Mexico City and, took that land. Ultimately, it is the story of us Europeans expanding and taking over this North America continent. I mean, it is a pretty violent history, but it is, it is what it is. And here we are. And it is still very, very interesting to see. I mean, the most interesting thing actually for me was how humbling it was to look at this land, to look at the size of it all, the, severe climate, and thinking about it. My God, what did people have to do in the 1800s to settle this, and to be honest, to take it from the natives?
Mm-hmm.
It was a huge effort. And it was incredibly risky, and it's daunting. You drive through this land and you go, oh my God, people rode on horses to come here. It's like, oh my God. I mean, what must have driven people to do this? How must conditions, and it ties back to Europe, right? Mm-hmm. How bad must have conditions been in Europe for people to do this?
Yeah, that's a really, really good point.
We think of Europe as prosperous, but then you look at the people that came in the 1800s, and you're like, it must have been terrible in Europe. Or, they risked everything. It is daunting. And it for me personally, I think it really elevated my spirit to say, wow, human beings are incredibly resilient. We're incredibly hopeful. We're incredibly innovative. And look what we can do if we really put our minds to it. And so there is also a message of hope, I think, that, we as a species, we're capable of incredible feats. So there's a message of hope there.
Love that. Love that. It's so interesting because we've done a few podcasts in Australia, and again the sort of first settlers from Europe there, they did not have it easy. I mean, that was really, really tough as well. But obviously it's a completely different story to the rationale for settling there versus the rationale for settling in North America. Just on that, I'm just kind of intrigued by that. Really, does history tell us that people came over to the US because conditions were so bad in Europe, or was it more that whole, I'm going to find gold and be a king in this new foreign land? Was it? Sometimes I just wonder, was it the promise of something new and better versus trying to escape from something that was truly awful?
Well, if you study immigration, which, I did, and I worked with refugees, right, for 10 years, that you have both, right? You have the people that escape, and then you have the adventurers. There's always a percent of the population that just wants a good adventure. It's, mostly men, but not necessarily. There are also some women. And, the West was all about that. This was the big unknown. And it's just, you could become extraordinarily wealthy here. Most people did not. But, I think you had the adventurers that came out here first to get a lay of the land, and make, the gold rush kind of was before the agricultural development. But I think, and then once the gold mines or the gold was found, then you needed locally grown produce to feed the miners and the population that would pop up everywhere. Like Colorado has a ton of gold mining and gold mining towns that then sprung up after the gold or the silver was discovered. So I think you have both types of people, but if you ever have a chance to go to Ellis Island and to look at the pictures of the people that came off the boat, the immigrant boats in Ellis Island, you get an understanding of how terrible conditions back then were in Europe and how grateful we should be to be born and living at this time in history.
Yeah, for sure. Very true. Before I let you go for this episode, I just wanted to sort of get from you a little bit more. Obviously, your company, which you founded, AT West, has been in existence for quite some time, and I'm in the privileged position of sort of having seen behind the scenes all of the mass of information that you guys send out for each tour, and I've got to say, I know you would probably think and say, Suzanne, that this is normal, this is just what we do. But the level of detail that you guys go into on the tours, on what people need to do to be prepared for the tours, the packing lists, the things that you should bring, it's incredibly detailed. You go to the nth degree. Is that sort of a common theme throughout all of the tours that you do, that you take it to that extra kind of level of detail for your clients?
Well, so, the West, when I started 30 years ago, we didn't have cell phones. We didn't have emergency signaling devices. Okay. So, I've worked with, large tour operators like Exodus. I worked with TUI. I worked with all the big tour operators, and ultimately, as an owner of this business, it is my responsibility to keep my passengers safe, right? And we still have regions in the Western United States where we do not have cell reception. And it is extraordinarily important to me that people, A, have a good experience and they're physically prepared for what's coming, and B, that we keep them safe. And so a lot of the safety, we have an excellent safety record, and a lot of the details come from I think from way back when you just had to basically plan these trips as if you were on an expedition. You're on your own, and you probably don't have cell phone until you get to the hotel room. You have signal. So we really have had very, very few accidents, and I want to keep it that way. And that is where the detail comes from, and so it's just that. So my goal is always to take people as deep into the wilderness as possible, and as deep into silence and solitude as possible, and and that is becoming in the more popular national parks more and more difficult because there's just a mass amount of people. That was the really surprising part, and I didn't touch on the hiking. The really surprising part about this trip to both David and me is how beautiful these parks are, how remote they are, and also how few people they're visiting. And the wonderful thing is that, it basically gives you a chance to go in March, April, October, November, when there isn't mass tourism, yet the climate is not as adverse. Mm-hmm. If you wanted to see the famous parks like Yosemite or Yellowstone, you almost would have to go like in October, and then you're dealing with snowstorms, or you're dealing with road closures, and that is just not the case in these places. So you get to go, shoulder season, and there's no crowds. And I think that is the thing that really surprised me, and that and the other thing that really surprised me is that this region is not featured by anybody. So I don't understand why. Maybe it's a lack of imagination or curiosity, but just the pueblos, the 8,000-year-old rock art, the Rio Grande Valley, the hill country of Texas is a huge limestone plateau. It's something totally different. We don't have anything like that in Europe. The just the flora and fauna in these deserts, and you're traveling through these different ecosystems, and you have these mountains that serve as sky islands, and they have bears on top, and they have cacti in the bottom, and it's crazy. I mean, it's truly stimulating. And for somebody who wants to see a lot of history and a lot of vast open spaces and no people, and get some activity in, this is perfect.
Suzanne, you're getting me very, very excited. But also I'm kind of frustrated because I want to kind of get over there now. But do you know, we usually, when we do these podcasts, we try and get I always try and get a sample of 2 or 3 minutes of our guest talking. That's going to be a teaser for the podcast. And actually, it was just the past 2 or 3 minutes that when you were just talking. That's going to be our teaser, which is going to go all out over social media, because as you were talking there, I was getting goosebumps, and I was just thinking, God, I want to get out there and get on that tour. Suzanne, it's a great point to leave it on. Hey, we need to get you back, and we need to do some of the other tours, right? Would you be up for that in the future?
Good. Absolutely.
Super. Hey, Suzanne, thank you so much. We have run out of time. Really appreciate you taking the time to talk us through and our listeners through very briefly this tour. Obviously, the full details will be available on our website and, of course, on your website. And the web address for your website, of course, is
adventuretravelwest.com.
Thank you very much. But for now, we'll leave it there. Suzanne, have a wonderful day. Thank you so much, and take good care. So there you have it. My huge thanks again to Suzanne for sharing her insights with us today. And that's another set of experiences and destinations for a bucket list, I guess. If you'd like to learn more about the tour, you can find it on lowseasontraveler.com, where there are full details and some amazing photos of all the places that you'll experience on the tour too. We're working on some awesome new competitions just now, where you can win your very own low season escape out of here. So please do like, follow and share the Low Season Traveller pages on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn and Twitter to keep up to date with all of our new content and promotions. And that's our podcast done for today. Thanks as always for your company. Have a great weekend wherever you are. Stay healthy, stay safe, keep your travel dreams alive, and don't forget to share this podcast with your friends, family and social networks. And finally, remember that now, more than ever, travel is better without the crowds.